Final words that will move you to tears. The last hours of Pope Francis before his passing. The world awoke on Easter Monday to shocking news from the Vatican. Pope Francis, the 266th leader of the Catholic Church, had died at age 88, just hours after appearing before thousands in St. Peter's Square for Easter Sunday celebrations. The pontiff, who transformed the papacy with his humility and focus on the marginalized, returned, as Cardinal Farrell announced to the House of the Father. Today we explore the Pope's final hours, the traditions surrounding a papal death, and how Francis, true to his character, changed many of these centuries-old customs. No one could have predicted the sudden turn of events. Just 24 hours before his death, Pope Francis appeared before tens of thousands of Catholics gathered in St. Peter's Square for Easter Sunday Mass. Though visibly frail and in a wheelchair, he blessed the crowds, waving to the faithful. As he was driven around the square, pausing multiple times to bless babies brought to him, his Easter message, delivered by an aide while he sat watching, called for peace in Gaza and Ukraine, condemning the great thirst for death seen in global conflicts. These would be his final public words to the world. Just hours later, at 7:35 a.m. local time, on Easter Monday, Pope Francis died at the Vatican. The pontiff's health had been declining since February, when he was hospitalized for pneumonia in both lungs, a condition worsened by the partial lung removal he underwent as a young man in Argentina. Despite his struggles, few expected his death so soon after his public Easter appearance. BBC correspondent David Giglione described witnessing people running towards St. Peter's Square when the news broke, some openly crying in the streets of Rome. Jorge Mario Bergoglio's journey to the papacy was unconventional from the start. Born in Buenos Aires to Italian immigrants fleeing fascism, he worked as a nightclub bouncer and chemical technician before joining the Jesuits. Rising through the ranks, he eventually became the first non-European pope in nearly 300 years, the first from the Americas and the first Jesuit to occupy the throne of St. Peter. During his 11-year papacy, Francis redefined what it meant to be pope. He rejected the traditional papal apartments, choosing instead to live in the Vatican guest house. He washed the feet of prisoners, embraced the disfigured, and fiercely advocated for the poor, migrants, and the environment. His final Easter message embodied his life's work, calling for freedom of religion, thought, and expression, while pleading for peace in conflict zones and aid for starving people aspiring to a future of peace. The death of a pope triggers a series of carefully choreographed events that have remained largely unchanged for centuries until Francis. Traditionally, when a pope dies, the Camerlengo verifies the death by calling the pope's baptismal name 3 times. When there is no response, the Camerlengo announces the pope is truly dead. The pope's fisherman's ring is then destroyed, symbolizing the end of his authority. The body is typically embalmed within 24 hours and placed on a raised platform called a catafalque in St. Peter's Basilica for public viewing. Traditionally, popes were buried in 3 nested coffins, cypress, lead, and oak, each symbolizing different aspects of the papal office. But Francis, consistent with his lifelong simplicity, rewrote these traditions. He approved plans for a less elaborate funeral and burial. Instead of 3 coffins, he chose a simple wooden coffin lined with zinc. He also eliminated the tradition of displaying his body on a catafalque, opting instead to remain inside the coffin with the lid removed for mourners to pay their respects. Perhaps most notably, Francis will be the first pope in over a century to be buried outside the Vatican, rather than joining his predecessors in the Vatican grottos beneath St. Peter's Basilica. Francis will be laid to rest in the Basilica of St. Mary Major, one of Rome's 4 major papal basilicas. This choice reflects Francis's deep devotion to Mary and his desire to remain connected to the people of Rome. Even in death, the basilica sits in the heart of the city, accessible to all who wish to pay their respects, a fitting final resting place for a pope who constantly pushed the church to go beyond its walls and into the margins of society. As news of the Pope's death spread, tributes poured in from around the world. World leaders, regardless of faith or politics, recognized the profound impact Francis had on global affairs. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen noted how he inspired millions far beyond the Catholic Church with his humility and pure love for the less fortunate. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni remarked, "I had the privilege of enjoying his friendship," adding that Francis had asked the world for the courage to change direction. USCI's Vice President J.D. Vance, who met with the Pope just hours before his death, expressed that his heart goes out to the millions of Christians worldwide who loved him. The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell remembered Francis as both a holy man of God who was also very human, witty, lively, and good to be with. In the coming days, the College of Cardinals will gather in Rome to elect Francis's successor in a process known as the conclave. After a 9-day mourning period, the cardinals will enter the Sistine Chapel, where they will remain sequestered until they elect a new pope by a two-thirds majority. When a decision is reached, white smoke will billow from the chapel's chimney, and the famous announcement, Habemus Papam, "We have a pope," will ring out across St. Peter's Square. The new pontiff will face the challenging task of following a pope who transformed the papacy and remained until his final Easter message, a voice for peace, compassion, and care for the most vulnerable. Pope Francis's death during this Easter season and Jubilee, year when millions of pilgrims are expected to visit Rome, seeking forgiveness, adds poignancy to an already solemn moment. The pontiff, who famously said he came from the ends of the earth, changed the Catholic Church and touched the hearts of believers and non-believers alike. As the bells of St. Peter's toll in mourning and the faithful gather to say farewell, Francis leaves behind a legacy that challenges us all to, as he often said, build bridges, not walls, and to remember those at the margins. For a man who chose the name Francis after Saint Francis of Assisi, the saint of the poor, his final journey maintains the simplicity and humility that defined his papacy. In death as in life, Pope Francis continues to teach us about the essence of faith and service. In the coming days, millions will watch as cardinals gather for the conclave to select his successor. Who will be chosen to follow in Francis's revolutionary footsteps? And how will the Church continue to evolve in our rapidly changing world? What happens when the Pope dies inside Vatican City? Pope Francis has passed away, and now the Vatican is in a rush. Everything must be perfectly coordinated, or things can become chaotic or worse. The Vatican has centuries of experience and has seen worst-case scenarios, which is why it has precise protocols in place verifying the Pope's passing, moving him to St. Peter's, and organizing the conclave down to the day and hour. Time is of the essence. The first order of business before anything else is to confirm the Pope is actually dead. Vatican officials used to perform this confirmation in the room where he died, but it now takes place in his private chapel. Cardinal Camerlengo, the prelate in charge of the Holy See's property and revenue, takes command of the Vatican until a new pope is elected. He conducts what is known as the Silver Hammer Protocol. In the past, this meant tapping the deceased pontiff's head with a small silver hammer and calling out his baptismal name 3 times. The idea was simple: if you don't wake up when someone's hitting you on the head with a hammer, you're probably dead. The silver hammer was used at least until the early 20th century, with Leo XIII's death in 1903, and may have persisted as late as John XXIII's death 60 years later. You might be relieved to know it wasn't used for Pope Francis, the Camerlengo currently Kevin Cardinal. Farrell still called out Jorge, "Are you dead 3 times?" Jorge obviously did not answer, and so Cardinal Farrell responded, "I declare that His Holiness, Pope Francis, is truly dead." To ensure accuracy, the Camerlengo might use an electrocardiogram, as was done to confirm John Paul II's death in 2005. With his death confirmed, Pope Francis's body was placed in an open coffin right away, though this is a recent change. If you remember John Paul II's funeral, you would have seen his body placed on an elevated bier called a catafalque or deathbed. Pope Benedict XVI was placed on one too, but Pope Francis changed this practice in November 2024. More on that later. For now, the Camerlengo and his team immediately sealed the Apostolic Palace and began securing the Pope's property to prevent theft. This tradition dates back to times when the risk of someone stealing the deceased Pope's belongings was much higher than it is now. However, some items are deliberately destroyed to preserve the integrity of the Pope's office. The fisherman's ring is the first to go. Each pope has a unique ring used to seal official documents. In the past, official seals were vital to confer authenticity on documents, and the tradition continues in the Vatican. Cardinal Farrell had Francis's ring destroyed to prevent forgeries. Until recently, the destruction involved the same silver hammer used to tap dead popes on the head. Things have changed, though. When Benedict XVI abdicated in 2013, his ring wasn't smashed, but cut into the pattern of a cross. Either way, Cardinal Farrell destroyed the ring in the presence of other high-ranking cardinals to ensure witnesses could confirm its destruction. Any documents sealed with that pattern from now on are known forgeries. The Pope's lead seal was also destroyed, All other property is donated, archived, or in extremely rare cases given to the Pope's heirs. After securing the deceased's body and vital items, the Vatican prepares for the public mourning period, though not all popes have approached this the same way. Typically, the Pope's body is involved. The best modern example is John XXIII, who was embalmed with formalin, a solution of formaldehyde containing methanol. When his body was exhumed in 2001, it was remarkably well preserved. Then Cardinal Virgilio Noe said it looked like he had died yesterday. Embalming isn't always necessary, though. John Paul II chose not to be embalmed. For Francis, it depends on his personal preference. What is necessary is the presence of the Swiss guards who accompany the Pope on his final journey from the Apostolic Palace to St. Peter's Basilica. The Swiss guards have protected popes since Julius II requested their presence in 1506, and this duty doesn't stop in death. They stand with their pikes and heavy armor protecting the Pope's body day and night. This devotion was evident recently when the Swiss guards refused to leave Benedict XVI's side after the lights in St. Peter's were ordered turned off. They likely recalled 1527 when 147 Swiss guards laid down their lives to protect Pope Clement VII from 20,000 attackers, employed by Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. You can bet they'll stay by Francis's side during these days too. Until recently, popes were buried in 3 different coffins, cypress lead and oak. But the famously modest Francis thought this was too extravagant. His body was placed in a simple wooden coffin lined with zinc and will be displayed to the public in St. Peter's for 3 days. On the 4th day, the Pope will take his last journey to his burial place. Many popes are buried in St. Peter's, where there is a necropolis, a literal city of the dead beneath it. The Romans used to bury their dead in these necropolies outside ancient city walls, as it was forbidden, and inside St. Peter's modern site lies directly over one of them. Most popes are buried in the Vatican's crypt, but Francis won't be. The Basilica of St. Mary Major is where Francis announced in December 2023 he had chosen as his final resting place. While unusual, it's not unprecedented. St. Mary Major is one of the 4 major papal basilicas and one of the 7 pilgrim churches of Rome. Francis has visited it over 100 times since becoming pope. 6 of his predecessors are buried there. Pius V, Sixtus, Clement VIII, Clement IX, Nicholas IV, and Honorius III. Though it's not unprecedented, it's notably retro. Clement IX was buried there in 1669, and no pope has followed until now. Though details are naturally kept secret, the Pope, even in death, will have more than the Swiss guards to protect him. High-tech surveillance systems keep the Vatican and all its residents, including the deceased, safe. With Pope Francis set to be honored properly, the Vatican turns to a much less certain task, choosing his successor. A week after Pope Francis's death, the College of Cardinals will spend 3 days preparing for a conclave. The name implies secrecy, but that wasn't always the case. The term originated after an election that took 3 years following Clement IV's death in 1268. The cardinals met in the remote village of Viterbo to choose his successor, a convenient place with less risk of disease. The villagers soon grew frustrated with the lengthy process and resorted to extreme measures to force a decision, like giving the cardinals only bread and water, or tearing the roof off their building to expose them to the elements. In the end, they chose Gregory X in September 1271, but there was a catch. He wasn't a cardinal or even a priest. He was on a crusade and took 8 months to reach the Vatican. Fortunately, things are less troublesome now. Gregory institutionalized the tradition from Viterbo, ordering that cardinals would receive only 1 daily meal if a conclave lasted beyond 3 days. Secrecy also became more important. The secret conclave was formally organized in 1274. Before then, cardinals could discuss it with anyone. Pope Pius then introduced a secret ballot in the early 20th century. Today, the conclave area is sealed off and cardinals are isolated. They can't watch the news, let alone talk on the phone or use a computer. During the 2013 conclave, the Vatican installed Faraday cages in vehicles equipped with jammers to block signals. There will likely be more jammers now to guard against intrusive drones. These measures might seem extreme, but they've worked well. How long might we expect to wait for the white smoke this time? The conclave to elect Pope Francis was remarkably fast, taking only a day from March 12th to March 13th. Benedict XVI's conclave in 2005 also took a day from April 18th to 19th. That doesn't mean there's only one round, though. A candidate is elected with a 2/3 majority from the College of Cardinals. That may not be as hard as it was between 1268 and 1271. Since the new pope will likely be one of them, though there's no requirement for it, the last pope not from the college was Urban VI in 1378. Though the cardinal electors are familiar with each other, there will still be plenty of black smoke. It took 5 ballots to elect Pope Francis with black smoke, signaling no new pope yet. How does the black smoke get its color? It's usually made of tiny bits of carbon, while the white smoke signaling a new pope is made of water vapor, fuel vapor, or mineral ash. Before the white smoke rises, the College of Cardinals asks the winning candidate if he accepts his election. If he agrees, he's asked to assume a papal name. Then the white smoke goes into the air. The newly elected pope dresses in the typical white vestments. Meanwhile, the senior cardinal deacon appears on the balcony of St. Peter's declaring, "We have a pope." The new pope then makes his public debut on the balcony and addresses the crowd below. After the public address, the pope returns inside to thank the College of Cardinals for its service and formally disband the conclave. The new pope chooses a date shortly after his election for his inauguration. This was once a solemn occasion with elaborate coronation rituals, but that hasn't been the case recently. Our popes John Paul I, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis opted for modest inauguration ceremonies. Instead, do you think this will continue with the next pope, or might we see something grander? We'll bring you exclusive coverage of the papal funeral and the historic conclave that follows. This is a pivotal moment not just for Catholics, but for our global society. If you found this insight into Vatican traditions valuable, please hit the subscribe button to stay updated on this historic transition of power. Your likes and comments help us reach more people with this important story, so take a second to share your thoughts below. For those who want to go deeper, our channel members get exclusive content, including expert interviews with Vatican insiders, historical analysis of past papal transitions, and real-time updates from our team on the ground in Rome. Join our membership by clicking the Join button below. Share this video with anyone interested in this historic moment, whether they're following for religious reasons or simply fascinated by these centuries-old traditions playing out in our modern world. Thank you for watching. We are Storybox reporting from Vatican City.